Karen from the neighborhood association kept using my hose, so I connected it to a sewage tank. Have you ever woken up one morning, stepped out in front of your house with a cup of coffee, and wondered why your lawn looks like it's been in a rainforest? That happened to me 3 weeks ago. The ground was soaked, puddles everywhere, and the hose was slightly warm, as if it had just been used. I live alone. I have no kids, no roommates, and no garden gnomes stealing water for their underground villages. Just me, my coffee, and apparently a self-watering lawn. At first, I thought maybe the automatic sprinkler timer was malfunctioning, but then I remembered I didn't even have sprinklers. Just a hose. And that's when I started noticing other strange things. The water bill had gone up, not just a little, it had spiked like I was filling a swimming pool every night. But I wasn't. The only things in my backyard were a dying tomato plant and my rusted-out barbecue grill. So where was all the water going? I started asking around here and there. Most of my neighbors were quite friendly, except for one, Karen. And yes, her actual name was Karen. She had moved in maybe a couple of months ago and immediately started acting like the queen of the street. She wasn't the president of the neighborhood association, but no one would have guessed that by the way she walked around with her clipboard, inspecting people's yards like she was the gatekeeper of paradise. She had filed complaints about the shade of green on a neighbor's shutters, demanded someone mow their lawn shorter, and even told the mailman he parked too aggressively in front of her mailbox. She was a nightmare, but still, I didn't think she'd go as far as stealing until I saw her. It was a Saturday. I had just gotten back from the grocery store, and as I pulled into my driveway, I caught her red-handed. There she was, wearing her floral blouse and an enormous sun hat, dragging my hose across my lawn like it belonged to her. She connected it to a portable pressure washer and started cleaning her front porch. No shame. No permission. No asking. Just there, stealing my water in broad daylight like she paid the bill. I just sat in my car, stunned. She looked up, waved at me like we were best friends, and shouted, "Hope you don't mind, just a quick rinse." She didn't even give me a chance to say anything, just turned back around and kept spraying. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, torn between confronting her or pretending I hadn't seen anything. I chose the latter. I went into my house and stared at the faucet like it had betrayed me. Later that day, I went to knock on her door politely. I asked if she needed help with her water pipes or anything like that. She laughed and said, "Oh no, I just like your hose better. The water pressure is amazing." I figured it was for community use anyway, right? Community use. I nearly choked. Last I checked, my house wasn't a commune, and water didn't fall from the gods, I was paying for it. I told her firmly, though still politely, that I didn't appreciate her using my hose without asking. She smiled, tilted her head, and said, "Well, I'm sure the neighborhood association won't mind. We're all supposed to share and be good neighbors." Then she closed the door. Just like that. Conversation over. Now, about me, I'm not one for confrontation. I don't shout. I don't escalate. I solve problems. So I decided to go through the proper channels. I sent an email to the neighborhood association, with photos. I explained the situation, attached my water bill, and asked for clarification on this supposed community property policy. A few days later, I got a response. It said, and I quote, "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably without the involvement of the neighborhood association." That's homeowners association language for, figure it out yourself. So I tried again. I bought a hose lock. Something simple. Karen couldn't use what she couldn't access. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next morning, the lock was gone. Not unlocked, gone entirely. Cleanly cut. Someone had used bolt cutters on my hose lock. I stared at the cut metal like I was at a crime scene. I even looked for fingerprints, though I wouldn't have known what to do with them. Deep down, I knew exactly who had done it, and sure enough, across the street, there was Karen again, using the hose to wash her SUV like she was in a commercial. Water sprayed everywhere like it was free, like it wasn't coming out of my wallet. I confronted her again, this time with less kindness. I asked her about the lock. She said, "Oh, that thing. It was a safety hazard. Someone could trip over it. I took care of it." Then she smiled, brushed her hair back, and kept scrubbing her tires. I couldn't believe it. I went back inside, sat down, and stared at the wall for 10 minutes. The homeowners association wasn't going to help. Karen was untouchable. And now, I was funding spa treatments for her house and her car. That's when I got the idea to install a camera, not a big one, just a small motion-activated security camera, hidden under the gutter near the faucet. If I couldn't stop her, at least I could document her. Maybe then the HOA would take me seriously. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd catch something so outrageous that the internet would take care of her for me. Because if there's one thing people online love, it's catching an entitled thief in high definition. 2 days later, I had crystal clear footage, Karen sneaking into my yard like a cartoon villain, dragging the hose with that same smug smile she wore every day. And the best part? She used it to water her plants, fill an inflatable pool, and then bathe her dog, all before I even woke up. It was the full Karen show, and I had every second of it recorded. I posted it on a local neighborhood forum with the title, "Neighbor Steals My Water Every Morning." The video blew up. People were outraged. Some laughed. Others offered advice. One guy even sent me a link to a motion-activated sprinkler for repelling intruders. But best of all, Karen saw it. I knew she saw it because the next morning, she knocked on my door. No sun hat, no smile, just fury. She said I was violating her privacy, threatening her reputation, and creating a hostile environment. I told her she was the one violating my property, stealing my water, and creating a financial burden. She huffed, crossed her arms, and said the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, "Do something about it. I dare you." And in that moment, everything changed. That dare lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. Because I was going to do something about it, something she'd never see coming, something she'd never forget. If Karen wanted water, oh, she was going to get water. The next morning, I woke up with a new mindset. No more being the polite neighbor. No more emails to the HOA. No more locks. Karen had dared me, and I was going to take her up on it. I was going to do something she'd regret every time she turned on a faucet. But revenge takes planning, and I wasn't about to go in without a plan. First, I wanted to see how far she'd go. Did she only use the hose when I wasn't home? Or was she brazen enough to steal water under any circumstance? I took a day off work and stayed home, blinds closed, coffee in hand, just watching. And sure enough, around 10:30 in the morning, I heard the soft hiss of the faucet turning on and the hose dragging across my yard. I peeked through the blinds. There she was again, in yoga pants and a smug expression, spraying her driveway like it was her own personal car wash. This time, I walked outside, phone in hand, pretending to text. She saw me, hesitated for half a second, and then continued as if I didn't exist. I said nothing. I just recorded. She didn't even flinch. It was like she wanted to prove I couldn't stop her, that my complaints, my cameras, and my warnings meant nothing. When she finished, she shook the hose toward me and said, "See? It works wonderfully. You should thank me for keeping it in shape." I forced a smile, went back inside, and reviewed the video again. I didn't even have to zoom in, the image was clear, direct, and incriminating. But even so, I already knew the homeowners association wouldn't do anything. I had tried that route. It was time for a different kind of justice. That afternoon, I uploaded the new recording to the neighborhood Facebook group, this time with a more eye-catching title, "Local Karen Turns Neighbor's Hose into Her Own Personal Water Park." Within hours, the comments poured in. Everyone had a Karen story, but mine hit a nerve. People were laughing, criticizing, suggesting ridiculous punishments, and a few even offered legal advice. Some were outraged that the homeowners association wasn't stepping in. The video spread beyond the neighborhood group, it made its way to Reddit, then YouTube. People from other states were tagging their friends, saying, "Karen. Oh, she found out." I knew she saw it because the next morning, she stood in her yard with two members of the HOA board, pointing at my house. I watched her through the window as she played the victim. I saw her making dramatic gestures and even pretending to wipe away a tear. A few hours later, I found a formal letter of reprimand in my mailbox from the HOA, accusing me of unauthorized surveillance and hostile behavior toward a resident. I nearly laughed. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even raised my voice. They were more upset about my recordings than about the water theft. So there I was, done playing by their rules. If the system wouldn't help me, I'd make my own. I started brainstorming. I thought about alarms, fake signs, pranks, but nothing felt like enough. I wanted something poetic, something that would leave a mark, not just make a mess. Then fate handed me the perfect opportunity. I was driving near a construction site on the outskirts of the neighborhood when I saw a crew installing a temporary sewage tank. Not just any tank, an industrial one, the kind used for portable toilets and waste containment. And I had a terrible, brilliant, and deeply satisfying idea. I pulled over and struck up a conversation with one of the workers. I asked some casual questions, told him I owned a house and had drainage problems, and that I might need a similar tank for an irrigation experiment. He laughed but was friendly. After a bit of small talk, I slipped him some cash to let me access the tank for just one night, strictly for testing purposes. He agreed with a shrug and said as long as I didn't touch the pump, he didn't care what I did. That was all I needed. When I got home, I pulled out my toolbox and built a small adapter that connected the shut-off valve to the spigot, with a second hose running underground and behind some bushes, directly to the sewage tank. It was perfect. The exterior of my hose still looked completely normal, but when someone turned it on, expecting clean, pressurized water, they'd get a surprise, a brown, smelly, unforgettable surprise. I tested it once to make sure it worked, using a separate line and a sealed bucket. The results were exactly what I hoped for. The smell alone could have knocked out a horse. Now I just had to wait. I set everything up secretly at night and made sure the cameras were recording. I left the main hose right where Karen always found it. The bait was perfect. The trap was set. And just as I'd hoped, the next morning, around 10:30, I heard it, the familiar hiss of the faucet turning on. I grabbed my phone and opened the live feed. There she was, dragging it across the yard again without even looking around. This time, she was so confident, so certain of her entitlement, she didn't even bother hiding. Then she connected the hose to a new rotary sprinkler, the kind that spins in a wide circle, and placed it right in the middle of her lawn. Then she turned the valve. At first, it came out slowly, a gurgling sound, a sputter. She tilted her head, confused. Then it happened. A stream of thick, dark, foul-smelling liquid shot out in a wide arc, spraying her lawn, her patio, and best of all, her white wicker furniture. The sprinkler spun once, twice, and on the third rotation, she started screaming. She screamed so loud I could hear her through the wall. She ran toward the shut-off valve, slipping across the lawn as it turned into a reeking swamp. Neighbors started peeking out. Some stood there, mouths open. A man dropped his coffee. Someone started recording. Karen wrestled with the hose like it was a snake trying to kill her. She yanked it out of the sprinkler, though not before getting another blast of sewage water on her legs. She ended up soaked, screaming, coughing, and best of all, there were witnesses. Real, live witnesses who saw it all. I watched everything on the screen, savoring every second. This wasn't just revenge. This was art. Later that day, I walked outside as if nothing had happened, pretending to check my mail. She saw me and exploded, marching over in a rage, still wearing her ruined sandals and covered in mud, yelling about lawsuits, biohazards, and threats. I said nothing. I just smiled and told her, "You told me to do something about it, and I did." Her face turned red, then green, then red again. She spun around furiously, shouting that she'd call the homeowners association. I waved and said, "Karen, make sure you tell them that this time, the water wasn't stolen." That night, I uploaded the footage, and within hours, the internet blew up. Karen was now officially famous, and not in a good way. By the next day, everything in my neighborhood had changed. People no longer whispered, they laughed openly. Ever since the clip of Karen's sewage sprinkler show hit the internet, her reputation had plummeted so hard it could have cracked the pavement on impact. The video spread like wildfire, especially after someone added dramatic music and a slow-motion zoom of her reaction. I hadn't uploaded it personally. This time, someone else did, probably a neighbor who had witnessed it live. You could tell by the angle, it was filmed from a balcony across the street. Within 12 hours, the clip hit Reddit, TikTok, and even mom groups on Facebook, with titles like, "When Karens Get What They Deserve," and "Neighborhood Justice at its Finest." But as satisfying as the public explosion was, it wasn't over. You see, the sewage incident was only phase 1. It worked beautifully, no doubt. But Karen wasn't the type to learn from her mistakes. If anything, the disaster had only triggered her instinct for retaliation. I knew her silence wouldn't last, and I was right. That afternoon, an envelope with a very official look appeared on my doorstep. Inside was a letter, printed in all caps, filled with legal jargon and empty threats. It accused me of intentional sabotage, endangering others, and biological assault. It even claimed that her dog had fallen ill from the incident, even though in my videos, it was clearly visible that the animal never went near the sprayed zone. I almost felt sorry for whatever lawyer she might have hired, because anyone who read the full story would laugh in their face. But I took it seriously. In a way, it confirmed what I already knew, Karen wouldn't stop. So I began preparing phase 2. Not another prank, something smarter. Something final. Her complete downfall. First, I reinforced my camera system, adding 2 more motion sensors on the sides of the house and one above the shut-off valve, hidden inside a fake birdhouse. I wanted a full 360-degree view in case she got clever. Then, I returned to the construction site, just to thank the workers and offer them pizza on my own dime. Keeping them happy meant keeping access to the sewage tank, at least a little while longer. They thought I was testing fertilizer flows. I didn't correct them. Back at home, I upgraded the hose system. The first version had to be connected manually and required careful timing. This time, I added a remote switch inside my garage. It controlled a diverter valve that could alternate between the normal water flow and the sewage tank. It was invisible, seamless, and buried underground with fresh grass laid over the top. It was excessive, but I wasn't taking any chances. If Karen dared to use it again, she'd never know what kind of water would come out. It was like Russian roulette, but with a hose. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Karen vanished. Not literally, she still lived across the street, but she didn't come out of her house for 2 days. Curtains drawn, car unmoved, yard neglected. No stolen water, no shouting, no patrols with her clipboard. It was eerie, like the calm before the storm. And sure enough, on the 3rd day, the storm arrived. A notice from the homeowners association appeared at my door. This time it wasn't a warning, it was a fine. A real fine. It stated that I had violated community health protocols and intentionally created a hazardous environment for a resident. The amount, $600. I stared at the paper in disbelief. I called the HOA office and demanded an explanation. I was transferred through 3 different board members before someone finally admitted that Karen had filed a formal complaint, with photographic evidence and 2 supposed witnesses, claiming I had threatened her with a chemical attack. I couldn't even laugh. It was too absurd. I offered to show them all my camera recordings with timestamps, including documentation from the construction site proving that the hose had only been connected on my property. They said they would review it at the next board meeting. That meeting, by the way, was scheduled for the following month. It was a trap. Karen knew exactly how the HOA worked: slow, bureaucratic, and easy to manipulate. She was using the system as her personal shield. But she made one mistake: she assumed I'd let it go, that I'd pay the fine or sit quietly and wait to be exonerated. What she didn't know was that while she hid behind paperwork, I was doing more digging. Over the next few days, I did my homework. I combed through public records, dug into the HOA bylaws, and even visited the county clerk's office. It wasn't obsession, it was diligence. And I found it. A small clause in the HOA rules, section 4.12b. Any homeowner caught entering another resident's property without permission, especially for the use of utilities, shall be subject to immediate investigation, fines, and possible suspension of HOA privileges. There it was, my golden ticket. Karen had trespassed on my property countless times. I had video evidence. I had time logs. I had witnesses. Unlike her, I had actual proof. I printed everything, stapled it into a thick packet, and sent copies not only to the HOA, but also to a few residents who had complained about Karen in the past. I didn't start a war. I started a rebellion. Within 2 days, a neighbor knocked on my door. It was a soft-spoken guy named Glenn who lived 2 houses down. He told me he'd had enough of Karen ever since she complained that his backyard hammock was too colorful. He thanked me for exposing her. Then another neighbor joined. And another. Karen had made enemies everywhere. I had only lit the fuse. Soon, the entire street was fired up. People were comparing stories, sharing notes, and passing around the videos like collectible cards. I no longer had to lift a finger. Karen had spent months acting like the queen of the block, and now her kingdom was rising up. The final piece fell when someone leaked a recording of a private HOA meeting where Karen was trying to manipulate the board. Her voice was unmistakable, and her tone, as smug as ever. The clip ended with her shouting that she was being targeted by jealous neighbors who couldn't stand a strong woman. That audio, combined with the sprinkler sewage video, created the perfect storm. Karen came out of her house 2 days later, wearing sunglasses, no makeup, and visibly shaken. She didn't shout, didn't steal water, just got into her car and drove away without looking at anyone. For the first time in weeks, the street felt peaceful. Quiet, like it was before she arrived. But I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. People like Karen don't disappear, they retreat, regroup, and plan their next move. That's why I left the remote switch installed. That's why I kept the cameras rolling day and night, because if she ever decided to try again, I'd be ready. This wasn't just about water anymore. It was about my boundaries. And Karen had learned that mine came with consequences. 3 days passed in a strange silence. Karen's house looked like it was under quarantine, no cars in the driveway, no music in the yard, no hose snaking across my lawn like a midnight thief. It felt almost too quiet, like a trap. Knowing Karen, I knew she wasn't licking her wounds in surrender. She was the kind of person who couldn't stand losing control. And after the sewage sprinkler incident, she had lost everything: her dignity, her pristine Porsche, and her reign as queen of cool on Zack Street. So when I heard a knock at my door just after noon, I didn't even flinch. I already knew it would be her. What I didn't expect was that she'd bring reinforcements. Standing on my porch beside her were 2 members of the Homeowners Association board, one holding a clipboard, the other with a folder. Karen, dressed like she was attending a courtroom drama, stood with her arms crossed, jaw tight, and eyes fixed on me like she was practicing a victory speech in her head. The man with the clipboard cleared his throat and said they were there to address an escalating property dispute and a potentially dangerous biological incident. I asked if they'd like to come inside, but Karen snapped that she didn't feel safe entering my house. I laughed internally, because I knew what this really was, her latest attempt to paint herself as the victim. They handed me a formal 3-page complaint full of exaggerated language. Karen claimed I had intentionally engineered a sewage system, created an environmental hazard, and was causing her emotional distress through what she described as an orchestrated campaign of public humiliation. She even alleged that the runoff had seeped into the foundation of her home, which made me wonder if she even understood how plumbing worked. I let them speak, nodding occasionally, waiting for the moment I knew would come. And it did. Karen demanded that I pay for the cleaning of her lawn and her Porsche, issue a formal apology, and attend a conflict resolution session organized by the HOA. As soon as she finished reading her list of ridiculous demands, I raised a finger and said I had something to show them. I went inside, grabbed my folder of printed evidence, and handed it over. It contained everything: time-stamped footage of Karen entering my property without permission on multiple occasions, always taking my hose. I included water bills, screenshots of neighborhood forum posts, and even a list of other neighbors who had filed complaints about her in the past year. Then I showed them the specific HOA bylaw she had clearly violated, highlighted in neon marker: unauthorized entry onto another resident's property for the use of utilities without consent. The man with the clipboard took his time reading. Karen turned pale as he flipped through the pages. The other board member leaned over, whispered something, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted. Karen began interrupting, saying the videos were doctored, that I was harassing her, and that I had created a hostile environment long before the hose incident. But they didn't believe her. The board members said they needed time to review all the material and would convene a special meeting later that week. Karen protested, saying she deserved immediate action, but this time, they ignored her. As soon as they left, Karen turned to me one last time. Her voice was lower now, sharper, almost trembling. She said she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I told her they already knew. With that, she stormed back to her house, muttering something unintelligible. That night, I posted on the same neighborhood forum, a calm, fact-based summary of what had happened. No sarcasm, no exaggerations. I just told the truth: how she entered my property, how she used my water, how I tried to go through the HOA, and how I defended my property when the system failed. The response was overwhelming. People took my side, once again sharing their own Karen stories. One neighbor even offered to mow my lawn for free as a thank you for standing up to her. Another left a freshly baked pie at my door with a note that read, "You're a legend." 2 days later, the HOA held the special meeting. It wasn't public, but word spread fast. Karen showed up with printed papers and a folder full of alleged legal threats against her. But all of it crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The board reviewed my recordings, went through the bylaws, and issued an official warning against Karen. She was fined $500 for multiple counts of trespassing and was warned that further incidents could result in suspension of her HOA privileges. They didn't apologize to me directly, but it was clear they were walking back their earlier support. Karen had become a liability they could no longer protect. Best of all, her supporters abandoned her. The board member who had once quietly backed her resigned the following week. Karen, once the self-proclaimed sheriff of the neighborhood, walked her dog with her head down, avoiding eye contact. Her driveway stayed dry, her porch dirty, and the hose. She never touched it again. But even so, it wasn't quite over. Karen made one last pathetic move: she filed a complaint with the city, claiming I had illegally installed a sewage system in my yard. An inspector came by who, after inspecting the setup and laughing for a solid 5 minutes, told me there was no violation. The hose wasn't permanent, there was no infraction. He even confided, jokingly, that he wished more people handled their problems with such creativity. I offered him a bottle of water. He declined with a smile, saying, "Only if it's not from that hose." By then, my video had surpassed 4 million views online. People were requesting interviews. One guy asked if I'd consider selling t-shirts with the phrase, "Hose Justice." My neighbors treated me like a local hero, but I didn't feel heroic. I felt relieved. Finally, after weeks of chaos, I had peace. And yet, a part of me remained vigilant. Because people like Karen don't disappear, they regroup, wait, look for new ways to strike. So I left the remote valve active, kept the camera system running, and even set out a brand new, shiny hose, coiled like a trap, ready to spring. Not because I thought she'd try again, but because if she did, I'd be ready. Because now, the entire neighborhood knew one thing for certain: if Karen ever came for my hose again, she'd better bring a mop. Nearly a month had passed since the sewage storm hit Karen's kingdom. Her house, once the epicenter of complaints and unsolicited advice, now stood as a forgotten monument to suburban tyranny. The porch lights stayed off at night. The curtains were sealed shut. And not once had her shoes touched my lawn again. The hose lay coiled in peace, untouched, gleaming in the sun like a retired warrior who had seen battle, and earned its rest. For the first time in what felt like forever, my mornings were quiet. No spikes in the water bill. No arguments over a simple garden hose. And no longer did I feel like a trespasser in my own home. Life had returned to normal, or something close to it. Now, my neighbors greeted me with smiles, not those polite, automatic ones, but genuine signs of appreciation. People who once looked away when Karen passed now stopped to chat with me gladly. Glenn, the hammock guy, even invited me to a backyard barbecue. And someone left, anonymously, a golden hose nozzle on my doorstep, like a trophy. No note. No name. Just a silent salute from someone who understood poetic justice. Meanwhile, online, the story had taken on a life of its own. The video kept gaining traction. Memes popped up. People started sharing their own Karen encounters alongside mine. One guy composed a parody song using the slow-motion sewage sprinkler scene set to dramatic opera music. Someone else made a comic-style animation recounting the event with cartoon versions of Karen and me. Every few days, I received another message from a stranger somewhere in the world saying, "Thanks for standing up to HOA madness," or sharing how my story had inspired them to finally confront their own neighborhood tyrant. I didn't seek fame, but I won't lie. It felt good. Even so, I never fully let my guard down. Karen had gone quiet, but silence doesn't mean surrender, it means she's planning. One afternoon, just after sunset, I found an envelope slid under my door. No stamp, no name, just a single sheet of paper, carefully folded. Inside was a handwritten note: "You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll come back stronger." The handwriting was unmistakable, the same angry cursive I'd seen on every complaint form she ever filed. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what she would do: dramatic, vague, and completely ineffective. The next day, a moving truck showed up in front of her house. No warning, no farewells. Just workers boxing up her flower pots, patio furniture, and that hideous pink flamingo she used to keep beside the mailbox. She didn't say a single word to anyone. She simply vanished. Her house went up for sale by the end of that week, and within a few days, a young couple with a small child bought it. They introduced themselves on the first day, brought cookies, and politely asked if it was okay to use their own water spigot. I nearly cried from the normalcy. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I received an email from a guy named Devin. He lived in another neighborhood across town, and somehow, Karen had ended up as his new neighbor. Of course, it didn't take her long to fall back into her usual routine. First, she complained that someone's wind chimes were too loud. Then, that a cat dared to walk across her steps. And finally, get this, she was spotted dragging another neighbor's hose across the lawn to wash her car. Devin found me through the viral video and asked if I had any advice for dealing with her. I told him everything. I sent him the valve system schematics, recommended the camera brands I used, and even shared a document I'd written called Karen Defense Protocol. He replied with 3 words, "This is war." I didn't hear from him for a few days. But when he wrote back, it was glorious. Devin had taken my idea and upgraded it. Instead of sewage, he used a mix of liquid compost and expired fertilizer, completely natural but with a truly awful smell. Karen got sprayed again, only this time, in front of a group of kids playing on their scooters. The footage wasn't as clear as mine, but it was hilarious. She screamed, slipped, and fell into her rose bushes. The video went online, and within 48 hours, people were calling it Karen's Revenge, Part 2. The saga continued. And I realized something funny, and a little unsettling. Karen wasn't just a problem. She was a roaming circus of entitlement, infecting every HOA she touched. But now, thanks to the internet, every time she struck, someone was ready to strike back. After that, I decided to do something productive with the experience. I started a small blog where I wrote about ridiculous HOA encounters, neighborhood drama, and absurd suburban situations. I didn't mention names directly, but everyone knew who the Hose Queen was. I turned the recordings into a mini-series, adding anonymous stories sent in by others. It grew faster than I expected. People were tired of being pushed around in their own homes. Somehow, my water war became the banner under which they could rise. I even started selling some funny t-shirts with slogans like, "Hose before brothers," and "Justice flows." But despite all that, my favorite part of the entire odyssey wasn't the views, the messages, or even the satisfaction of watching Karen soaked in her own filth. It was something simpler. One afternoon, I was in my backyard trimming the hedges when I heard laughter, real, loud, carefree laughter. It was the new couple who had moved into Karen's old house, chasing their child around a sprinkler they'd set up in their own yard, using their own hose. The kid was squealing with joy. The parents were laughing. No one was stealing water. No one was issuing fines. That was the real victory, not revenge, not viral fame, but peace. That the neighborhood had become a place again where people respected each other's space, where the only thing coming out of a hose was water, not war. As I stood there with my own hose in hand, I thought about all the chaos a simple plastic tube and a little water pressure had caused. Who would have thought that a garden hose could take down a power structure, unmask a tyrant, and unite an entire street of strangers? It was ridiculous. Poetic. And perfect. I turned on the faucet, let the hose come to life, and watered my tomato plant like before, in peace, with no audience. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was home.